Hi everyone, my name is Lili Davoudian and I'm joined today by my colleague TJ Banasik. We work on the Microsoft Defender for Cloud and Microsoft Sentinel product teams, and we're really excited to share the Azure Security Benchmark Workbook. This workbook really brings together the best of the Microsoft compliance ecosystem. We've partnered across the Sentinel, Defender for Cloud, M365, and other teams to really bring together visibility from all of these sources. When you look at the Service Trust portal, we have a lot of artifacts there that you can leverage around public audits, and it serves as a great starting place for compliance. M365 Compliance Manager is another great way to understand the full granularity around controls like NIST, and you can augment that with the telemetry that we get from Microsoft Sentinel to really understand monitoring and your full posture. When we think about Defender for Cloud, we provide not only the visibility into your compliance around various regulatory standards, but we also share feedback and best practices for hardening your workloads. And when you bring these different aspects of the ecosystem together, you really get that full story and that comprehensive view, not only of your posture, but also of steps for remediation and hardening. The V3 of the Azure Security Benchmark is really an update to something that we've had out there for a few years now. Azure Security Benchmark is the driver for all of the recommendations that we surface in Microsoft Defender for Cloud. It is a set of Azure-specific best practices for hardening your workloads, and it has mappings to PCI, to CIS, to NIST, and really helps you harden your attack surface and prevent against threats. In this new iteration, we've seen updates in terms of the mappings that we have, and really brought together the updated versions of PCI and of CIS to make sure that the recommendations we surface are holistic and up to date. We have refined the control guidance and are really trying to get as granular and as actionable as we can. We've also added new controls as we recognize the security landscape is changing. And we now have a control such as DevOps security that really helps you think about software supply chain management. And we're really working to protect your whole environment and help you harden against threats. In addition to serving those policies and that regulatory compliance framework that's standardized across Azure, we also provide best practices for remediation and automation here to really help you get secure and to not have to worry about new workloads that you may be deploying into Azure. So when we think about what's changed in the workbook, we really have gotten such great feedback from our customers and our user community on what they like, as well as areas for improvement, and we've tried to build a lot of those in. We recognize that the scale of our customers is growing, and we've really consolidated to help support that scale. We, based on user feedback, also redesigned the interface and tried to make it more usable. We have workbooks for different regulatory compliance standards that all have the same interface, so it's really easy to pivot across workbooks and to be able to make the most of the telemetry that you're getting in Microsoft Sentinel. As we've seen our products mature and we've seen our integrations mature, that's really helped tell the story and increase the power of the workbook, and you'll see that some of our integrations have really grown over time, and you can see the benefits of that in the workbook. We also have added a controls crosswalk, which really helps you navigate a big framework like this at scale, and again facilitates the ease of use. As I mentioned, we've also added new control areas. We want to make sure that this is something that's staying up to date as your security posture grows more complex and we see the threat landscape changing. We want to make sure that ASB is still protecting your environment. When we think about the benefits of the workbook, TJ will jump into a lot of these during the demo, but the audience of users for this is really broad. Implementers can use the dashboard type visibility for the design and build stage. We have a really awesome print to PDF feature that we'll show in the demo that can really help use this as an artifact for auditors and again for that assess phase. Because of the ease of printing this solution, you can also share it with decision makers and use it to build into your roadmap and to think about security long term. We also have, through Microsoft Defender for Cloud, great recommendations to harden your attack surface based on some of the policies and recommendations that we're surfacing. And so analysts can use this to monitor threats and to respond and to harden your attack surface proactively. We've also built in some automations and some quick fixes into the product that really help you get secure quickly at scale. Again, we're really interested in how we fit into the Microsoft ecosystem and want to make sure that this is as usable with the other products in our security suite, and we've really consolidated that story. The workbook itself has over 250 visualizations that you can take advantage of right off the bat. We have parameters for filtering, so you can see the story across tenants, across subscriptions over time, and get that overarching view. Or if you prefer, you can drill down and look at one subscription for a short amount of time. So we want to give you both the bird's eye visibility, but also the opportunity to drill down to a specific story or use case as needed. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to TJ to talk a little bit about getting started and then jump into a demo.
Hey team, TJ Banasik from the Microsoft Sentinel product group. The first thing that you need to do in getting started is understand some of the prerequisites, and I'll walk you guys through the panel to understand what's needed. But the takeaway is, to get up and running, you're going to need to have a certain amount of RBAC-based privileges to deploy, view, and adjust recommendations. It's a prerequisite to have Microsoft Defender for Cloud and Microsoft Sentinel to ensure that you're getting the most out of the workbook. One of the nice things to understand is we're using 25 plus Microsoft products, first, third party, multi-cloud on-prem, just a huge array of different tools. And you don't need all of those. They provide enrichment. So if you're navigating the workbook and you're finding an empty panel, definitely do check the prerequisites and getting started. But a blank panel isn't bad. That enables decision making for you to say, hey, maybe I have a control gap and I need to have coverage, or my connectors aren't healthy, or I need to adjust my recommendation. So always think of this as a living workbook. It's the idea behind it for you to assess and also set a plan of action and milestones to remediate that control and get the full visibility. As far as onboarding, we do it from the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Workbooks Blade. That has a link into our community repos for pulling down the content, deploying it into your workspace. And once you do that, you can navigate the content. So there's a link down there for getting started. If you want to navigate it to Git, there's single-click deployment buttons. And the Defender for Cloud Workbooks Blade basically allows you to move over there if you don't have the URL. So we'll walk through that during the demo-based portion of today's presentation. The next thing that I want to talk about is a use case based scenario. So you as a customer are wondering, how can I use this content? What are the ways that I can get some value out of it? So understanding that there are different use cases is going to be rather important. The example that we have today is control NS5, which is the distributed denial of service control. So we'll pivot the slide deck over and kind of walk through what that looks like as we're navigating the control. This is a use case here. So what we want to do is give you guys an example of how you're going to be able to use this workbook in practice. So the first section that we have is assessment. So assessment builds on top of the Defender for Cloud regulatory compliance initiatives. And what we do is we weight that. So if I have a policy such as deploy DDoS protection, maybe I've got multiple assets and public IP addresses that need coverage. For each asset that requires a policy to be applied, we get a score of 1. And in the posture assessment section, we'll get an overall scoring by control family. So the network security group will have a pass fail, and that allows me to prioritize where I want to spend my time and also get a heads up display to analyze my posture. Keep in mind, flavor of the day, while there's a lot of compliance backing to this, it's going to be workload hardening. How do I get a quick view of my cloud and multi-cloud environment, and how do I harden that out to make sure that it's as secure as possible? After we've analyzed the posture, we're going to go into build design. So each one of the ASB v3 controls has its own control card. The control card will show you the overview of the control. It'll link into the documentation page. We will put out multiple pieces of telemetry. Lili did a great job explaining some of those different areas. So it can be the policy, the logging telemetry, the live assets, incidents and alerting, whatever we can bring from that very deep wealth of different telemetry, you have it there. The nice thing is this isn't an additional paid offering. You've already invested in these tools, and this is additional value add. So when you deploy a workbook, you completely own that content as soon as it's deployed. You can add, remove, tweak, modify, bring on your own custom use cases. You fully own that content as you deploy it, and it's just sitting on top of the logs that you've already invested in. So cool thing as well is if you're new to a control, we give you this smart card to help you get up and running. So how do I enable DDoS protection? What are the documentation links that I can use to guide me through? What's the overlay to different compliance frameworks? And we've got a lot of different tools within the ecosystem. From an analyst or an engineer or architect perspective, it can be kind of confusing. How do I go from Microsoft Defender for Cloud into the DDoS protection blade? And we'll give you a quick link, basically a smart card to allow you to pivot into any control that we recommend, so you can have much more of a seamless experience. If you're new to any of these controls, you also have a link to the product page. When we use the telemetry, we'll let you know which product is there and look at it more as a capability versus a product name. So really helping you understand if you're using something different than Azure DDoS standard, maybe in this example, you'd be able to adjust this control card to your third-party control and also document what your plan of action and milestones are. After that, we want to review the different security controls in place. So this is one of the big improvements for the ASP v3 workbook over the previous one. We've got a lot deeper integration with Azure Resource Graph. So in the DDoS protection example, I have policy saying that I need to enable DDoS. I also have Azure Resource Graph to where I get a list of all of my different DDoS plans, where they're located. Any text that's blue is deep linked, meaning I click on it and it'll bring me right into my DDoS plan without even doing an authentication. So understanding that a controller requirement is a lot deeper than just policy. This allows us to review what controls are currently employed in the environment. The next component is monitoring. So we really want to harp on the better together story with Microsoft Sentinel, and that's where you'll get a lot of very deep telemetry from security incidents, events, policy, metrics, anything that we can pull to make your life easier in assessing and getting a very well-rounded picture of this control, we're going to bring that in. So this is an example of one of the panels that's coming in from Microsoft Sentinel. We're using Sentinel to monitor DDoS attacks and provide a visualization around that. So in this example, you can see that our workspace is actually being attacked with DDoSes. Of course, we simulated these, but you get an example of what type of DDoS attack is at play, how big it is, how much this control defended, which one of the controls was defending, the IP address, everything that you need to make a determination that this control is deployed, it is protecting me in my workload. And if I want to explore that a little bit further, any one of these panels sits on raw telemetry. So there's a button to drop right into that logging and understand what happened if you want to take it a little bit further. Lastly, we have the respond and remediation. So we did a lot of work in this new version of the workbook to ensure that anytime that we show you something, if it's a security incident, you'll have a deep link to go into Microsoft Sentinel security incidents to get the 5 Ws. If there's a recommendation for a policy that needs to be assessed, there's a deep link to seamlessly pivot you into Defender for Cloud and make that adjustment and change. So as you're getting this deep amount of visibility, you also have the ability to respond to it. You know, when there's a weakness or an area that needs hardening in your workload, you'll get a deep link that'll drop you into the place that you need to tweak that configuration and further harden out your workload. Awesome. Now we're going to jump into the demo-based component, and we will get started with the deployment phase, which is what we use to get started. So I'm now in Microsoft Defender for Cloud. I'm going to roll down to Workbooks, which is where we host these offerings. As I do that, just one pro tip, make sure that all your subscriptions are selected. We'll then go up to the community repo. So we've got the PG supported offerings, which are at the bottom there in purple, and any additional offering outside of those core 4 or 5 is going to be pulled out of the repo gallery. So I'm going to scroll down to Defender for Cloud. This brings us to our public GitHub repo. You can see we've got quite a few of them. These are growing very rapidly, very quickly. So very, very rich wealth of different workbooks and visualizations that you can use to improve your posture and your visualization, really getting more out of Defender for Cloud. I'm going to select the Azure Security Benchmark v3. We get an overview of the offering, so if you want to explain this to folks on your team and understand what it is and how to get started, this README will help you out with that. We also added these buttons, so a single-click deployment to either Azure or Azure Government to lay down into our workspace. So if you're in the government cloud, yes, you're going to have parity there. If you're in the commercial cloud, it's there. Note that you'll decide exactly where you put it, so you authenticate to your workspace. Now we're into my demo tenant. The only thing that I need to populate within this is the specific workspace that I want to put it in. We'll have the name of the offering. I could change this if I want to call it something different, but I go to review and create. Azure is going to validate this, make sure that I put everything in. Pretty simple. You'll notice that there is going to be a prompt saying you need to agree to the terms of service and how that you're using a community-based offering. So a lot of times when you validate the template, that'll come up and you'll go, oh, wait a minute, something's wrong. For this one, you just click create. I've acknowledged the terms, I'm comfortable with what it's doing, and I'll deploy it into my workspace. We're going to give it a second to deploy. So what it has done for us is gone into Defender for Cloud and deployed this workbook into our gallery so that we can go and access the content. So I'm going to go back to Defender for Cloud. Same as we did before. Scroll down to Workbooks. Make sure that we're selected on everything that we have here. Workspaces are good. I'm going to go and look in here. I'm not seeing it right off the bat. Sometimes it takes just a few seconds to get in there. So I'll search to see if we have it. Azure Security. Got dashboards, not seeing it in the gallery yet. So we'll back it out and throw one more refresh in there to make sure that we're using the most recent version of the Workbooks gallery. And here we go. You notice that it took about 15 seconds to get in there. Being that it's the newest one that we've deployed, it's going to be the first one in the recently modified workbooks. And here we are into the content. So a few things that I wanted to highlight is the most prevalent use case is printing the content. So when I select that, anything that's down here in my workbook, it's basically creating a custom report. So keep that in mind. If you want to show one control, a posture assessment, an executive summary, everything at once, you have the ability to print this as a PDF report. It pairs very well with the Regulatory Compliance Initiative, which will pull out an assessment of controls. So if you really want to hand this off to your security leadership, your regulators, your different teams, these are two really powerful, basically exports that you can do to share that report. Getting started, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the prerequisites, just highlighting that this tab is here to get started with. So there are an amount of role-based access controls that you need to have, including owner if you're signing a new regulatory compliance initiative. The ASB assessment is built in to regulatory compliance, so you won't have to worry about that so much. But you want to make sure that these prerequisites are completed. If you're seeing an issue and the data isn't coming out the way that you expect, fall back onto these and make sure that you're set up the way that's recommended, and that's going to give you much more of the desired user experience. Lili touched on a lot of areas that we've improved this. This is currently the third iteration of this content. One of them is in these parameters. So if I have my cloud, multi-tenant, cross-tenant, hundreds of subscriptions, I can now scale that and select it. We've tested this up to 200 workspaces at a time. So it's going to have a lot more massive scale if you need to look at this. And customer feedback is this is one of the best tools that you have to bring together a lot of different workspaces into a consolidated story. So always do keep that in mind. Time range parameters, I'm going to set that on 30 days. We have adjusted these slightly, mainly to be able to augment performance and make sure that this scales as needed. So if I decide that I want to look at a bigger time set of data, I can say, hey, 30 days is enough. I want to look at 90 days, or if I have a year, 2 years, whatever my threshold is, I'm able to set that custom report to see the data. I do want to highlight that we've got a survey. It takes about 3 minutes to complete that. Tell us what you think. We use that to drive our roadmaps and to do future iterations of these content offerings. So certainly do check it out, click that link, and that goes directly to our team in the product group for development of the offerings. Always keep in mind that blue is a deep link. So anytime that you see blue text, that's going to take you to resourcing. So you have really a lot of power to dive down. When you see something and you want to know more, those deep links are going to take you and help you to navigate this at a much more greater level of depth. So if I don't know what ASP v3 is, that one link takes me into the docs page, but you'll see those all throughout the offering. In our example scenario, we're going to be looking at Control NS for Network Security 5, which is Enable DDoS Distributed Denial of Service Protection. The first thing that I'm going to do is a posture assessment. So you notice this brings up basically a sub-control area that's evaluating our policy. And I know that the control that we're interested in is in network security. I'm going to select that, and all the panels within this section are going to respond to it. So here I see my overall assessment. Within the last 90 days of my time selector, I only have about 26% compliance with controls. So in the network family, there's a lot of work that I need to do to get up and running. I have about 260 controls. So I either need to address these, deploy controls, or I need to understand that I may have a compensating control and do the rule suppression, which is basically documenting a compensating control and putting that into the tooling. But certainly a lot of work for me to do right now in current state. Over here, I have the recommendations that need to be applied. So I'm just going to search DOS, and you can see Azure DDoS protection should be enabled. It's been passed 15 times, meaning I've got multiple assets that are being protected. Also keep in mind that if it wasn't being protected, I can go to remediate the control. And what remediate will do is seamlessly bring me into the control assessment, pivot me over to the exact place that I would need to go and understand which of my resources are in play. If anything was unhealthy, I could select that and remediate the control right there. So really reiterating that win theme that if we're providing you a recommendation or asking you to change something or showing you a weakness, we'll also give you the deep link to make the changes as you're going through. So be on the lookout for those tabs. They're all throughout the offering. I go down, and all of these are cuts on the same set of data, just different ways to look at it. So this one is going to be the asset. So any asset that needs remediation within the network security family is going to come down in here. So I can see that some of these different assets are going to need more help than others. So it's organized by total, meaning the ones that have the biggest scope. But if I want to sort by, SES resource ID, overall total, past controls, passed and failed, I have the ability to do all of that. And if I don't know the KQL query language and I just want to put something in, you'll get a lot of filtering. And this is good for new users who might not know how to navigate the workspace. It allows them to explore the data without needing to know that query language. At any point, if they want to see raw telemetry, there's always going to be a link at the top right of these panels to jump into the Custo query language to bang around with the telemetry. That's better, especially for more advanced users that know how to use this query language and want to get more information. This is recommendations over time. This is going to measure compliance and configuration drift. Anytime there's a peak, that's multiple recommendations, meaning I have a configuration error or weakness in my workload. So on December 14th, 25 recommendations, somebody changed something and they didn't do it the right way because it didn't deploy these assets securely, at least from a networking-based perspective. A lot of recommendations were made, they were remediated, but the next week it happened again, and it happened again, and it happened again. So ideally what I want is flatten this graph over time. As flat as I can get it, the better. And anytime there's a spike, that's going to enable me as a security governance professional to go in and say, what happened, who onboarded it, what was changed, why wasn't that changed within our configuration management procedures, and harden that and understand that over time. So this panel especially is really looking at how to get better over time, how to measure that configuration compliance drift. Lastly, we have one that'll give the raw details. So if you want to understand what each one of these controls are and how they're applied, as well as the quick fix, you get a summary here showing all your controls. So I'm happy that I've got a posture on my network security, and I've kind of showed you guys how we're going to focus in on DDoS protection. Another area that we've added is controls crosswalk. So there's a lot going on in this workbook, a lot of different things in there. So we have different control names and areas and recommended products and security compliance. If I want to help me kind of figure out where I want to spend my time or navigate this data, I could say, tell me about controls that involve DDoS. You'll see that NS5 is the control that we want to go to explore this. If I want to look at maybe Key Vault, I can say, how does Key Vault help me out when I'm hardening? I've now sorted to a list of controls that Key Vault is applied to. Or if I'm using a different compliance control, I can say, NIST 853, where does AC2 help me out? Maybe I've done an audit there, and then any control that uses AC2 is sorted. So this is really a way to navigate this offering and understand where you can spend your time and save you for looking throughout the offering. So now we're going to go into network security per our scenario, and I see that I've got a sub-page for network security has been displayed. I've got all of my controls and control cards here. I'm going to go down to DDoS protection, like we found in NS5. And when I click that button, it rolls me down to the control card for this offering. So if I don't know what this control is, I click on here, brings us into the docs page to explain exactly what this control is and what we need to do. So you notice that this looks very familiar to the control card, and that's intentional. You now have a smart card here with a little bit more depth to understand that. We can see that we're using two controls to do that. If I don't know what DDoS protection is, this will bring me into the product page to understand capabilities, features, documentation, and pricing. We see all of the telemetry that we're using. So if I wonder where these panels are being populated from, say they're blank, this tells me the different data that's being used. If I want to implement this, like how do I turn on DDoS protection standard to make sure that I'm covered here? This brings me into the docs page to get started with that tool and control. If I want to go pivot to that tool within Azure, this will take me there. Anytime we reference a tool, we'll give you the smart card, and you notice that little blue icon indicates that it's going to a portal. We also have the different compliance control regulations. So if we're saying that this control aligns to the new version of CISSP-8, I can select that, and this will bring me over to their benchmark and help me use that. If these compliance frameworks are important to me, this will pivot over to those controls to understand it a little bit better. Right now for recommendations, I can see that I'm in a good place, past all the recommendations that are in there. One of those is applicable to DDoS. The other 14 have compensating controls and are covered. So not a ton that I need to do. If there's any red in there, that would indicate that I want to use that remediate button to go look at that control. Understanding that we want to take it deeper than just the policy assessment will bring us into DDoS plans. So this is my DDoS plan. I can go look at this asset, explore all the configurations of it, and having a control here lets me know I'm meeting my policy and my asset is deployed as well. Lastly, we have the attack-based telemetry. So DDoS is a form of attack where an adversary tries to overwhelm your network with a large amount of network traffic simultaneously at one time. So we're being attacked. We have a demo tenant that's doing this. We can see exactly how it is, how much data is coming in, what type of attack it is, which one of our assets defended it, which test account that we simulated from, and when it happened. At any point where I say, hey, I'm concerned about this, I can drop into the query and explore it a tad bit further. So really looking to have a very well-rounded assessment of a control to help you out in making these decisions. So the last thing that I want to show before we close out the demo is one of the areas that's changed the most significantly for ASB version 3, and that's the DevOps security control area. This is a brand new control area. It's really focused at software and supply chain management to help you better manage your infrastructure as code, your deployment pipelines, your GitHub, your DevOps, whatever you're using, these controls are going to be applied to that. So just like we did before, I'm going to select the control that I'm interested in, DS DevOps Security 3, Secure DevOps Infrastructure. So you notice the same familiar experience of a control card, it's just different data and a different control. So I've got a lot more docs as far as things that I can do to secure my workload. And the takeaway here is monitor your DevOps infrastructure. So on the right, we see live telemetry from our GitHub instance. and I can see my administrators going through what they're adjusting, how they're changing the code, and really be able to monitor that with a different perspective. So we really want ASP v3 to be the most well-rounded assessment that you can make in the cloud-based environment, not only using our learnings with Microsoft best practice, but also the ecosystem as well. So getting outside of just your workloads into left of bang as far as design, pipelines, infrastructure as code, DevSecOps. So that's the takeaway that we have for today. In the demo, definitely encourage everybody, take the time, go and deploy this workbook into your workspace. Let us know what you think here with the survey. Thanks so much for the time today, guys. We'll see you on the next one.